Hope. I am getting ready for the holiday weekend, but before I can leave and go have some fun, I got to get the work done. And so yesterday I spent some time doing laundry, and we're getting ready to pack. But right now I'm going to do a quick video on how to can some pickles. I learned this from my mother-in-law, who passed down her canning equipment to me. She gave me her pot that she's had forever, and it hasn't sprung a leak yet, so I still use it when I do large batches. But while I'm doing this, I've put in a mask. We have this Replenish mask, which is made by Monat, and I put it on my hair, and then I braided my hair and pulled it back while that's setting on my hair, so that you're supposed to leave it on for 15 minutes. So this shouldn't take me more than 15 minutes at all. So it's perfect timing, and then I'm going to rinse it out. So I went and had Randy go pick the garden for me before we left, because oftentimes when we leave for even a couple of days, we come back and there's a massive amount of cucumbers, and they're this big and too big to can, and we end up having to juice them. But this is the pickles I have here. Let me angle this down a little bit so you guys can see what I'm doing here. These are the pickles we picked out of the garden today, and so we have a pretty good supply here of very fresh pickles. And so I've already gone through and washed them under cold running water, and I scraped them with a stiff brush. I try to avoid using a sponge because sometimes they're really sharp. They have these little sharp little ridges on them, and you want to remove those, as well as any flowering that's going on with the tips. And you want to cut off any like vine that maybe you pulled when you pulled them off the vine. So you just use a little sharp knife like this, and you just clean them up really good. And you try to keep a real sterile area. So I have got some clean cloths down, and I've already sterilized my jars. I've got some quart ball mason jars here, and so I've already sterilized them. I always put a good hot bath. You can also run them through the dishwasher, you know, by themselves on hot water, but get everything very sterile and very clean. And this is that cookbook I wanted to show you that I inherited from my mother-in-law. It's the Farmer's Journal for freezing and canning. So when I got started, I started my brine. So I have my brine back here and this pot heating up. And so her recipe is right in this cookbook, where you put some water. So this recipe, you heat up 2 quarts of water, a quart of vinegar, a half a cup of salt, and a half a teaspoon of alum. So you pour that into a pot and you put it to boil. So while I was scrubbing the cucumbers, I have that boiling back there. Then I also went ahead and started my hot bath. So in a bigger pot, I'm expecting, just from the quantity of pickles or cucumbers I have, that I'm probably going to have 2, maybe 3 jars. So I'm just using just your everyday big pot, you know, I would boil water in. And so I've got that back there. You don't need fancy equipment. You don't need to have, you know, the big pots and the pressure cookers and things like that. You could do canning very easily with just things you have in your kitchen. So for that big pot, I just actually wadded up a bunch of foil, heavy duty foil, and I put it in the bottom of the pot. So you do want a little bit of space between the bottom of these glass jars and the bottom of that pot where it's really hot. So I've got those 2 going, and I'm sweating a little bit because it got hot just moving around. Of course, I've got 2 pots of steaming going on there too. But anyway, this cookbook's really nice. I remember when my mother-in-law quit canning, I asked her if I could have it. She saw my interest in canning. I didn't do this when the kids were younger. I really didn't. You know, I was really busy with activities with them, so I didn't even have a garden until they were older. But now that they're gone and I have grandbabies, it's kind of my time to be the grandma, and so I can. And so I think the copyright edition on the first edition of this was in 1963, and this edition is 1978. So it's been around a long time. It's got a lot of bread and different peach kind of recipes and pies, and so I use it quite a bit for canning. I also have her recipe for her salsa, which I've also been doing. And I learned my lesson the other day. Try not to do both salsa and pickles on the same day, because I was exhausted. So what goes into the actual jar? These jars, her recipe is the brine you have over there, and then you also add to the pickles, to the cucumbers, we add a bay leaf. So one of these goes into the jar. We add a pepper. Now I grew these peppers in my garden. I grew like probably 6 different varieties. I have some cayenne peppers, I have some serrano peppers, I have jalapenos, and you add pepper to taste. I made some the other day, and I actually didn't add any peppers at all, and I labeled them precious so that he can eat them and they're not spicy, because this recipe is very spicy. You can add 1 or 2 just depending on how spicy you like them. I'll just add 1 today. I think I've got 3 or 4 serranos here that I can add. And then you also add some dill and some garlic. So I have some really big cloves of garlic that I've peeled. I've already peeled these and I washed them, and they go in here as well as a grape leaf. So that's the basic ingredients, and then some dill. So I have some dill here that was from my dill plants last year that when they got big and they started drying out, you take them and you peel off the seeds. So this is from my garden from last year. And so I've been using this for dill, and I also got some dill from my niece Megan, whose neighbor had a lot of dill, and it will get away from you. If you've ever planted it, it just grows. In fact, it got so bad, it took over an entire bed in the garden, and we ended up cutting it back too far. So we started again this year, but it didn't make it. But this is a 1/4 teaspoon of this dry dill. And then, let's see, I've got my pepper in there already. And then you start adding the pickles. I mean the cucumbers. I forget they're not pickles until after you cucumbered them, right? So these are fresh, straight out of the garden, organic. We plant with soil we buy from a local landscaping place. I think this year we used one in Blanco. Last year we used one in Dripping Springs, but we haul it in the back of the truck and fill those beds. So the trick is to get these stuffed into this jar. That I sometimes find is the hardest part. So just finding a good variety of sizes. I often would ask my mother-in-law, how do you get them in there? She goes, well, you just work them in there, because when they're dry like this, they're real hard to get them to fill that jar. So you just cram them in there as best you can. And I really like, these are my favorites, the little bitty ones, because of course they're the crunchiest, right? So I always have a few of those available to put like near the top when you're trying to finish off a jar. So I'm just stuffing these babies right in here. And I love this. It's, it's very relaxing to me, gardening and canning, and I love the product that you get as a result. All my family loves my pickles. When they're here at Father's Day, I was like, take you a jar, I have plenty there. So they were happy to help me out with that. So I can hear my brine boiling over here. So I'm gonna bring it over here, and I'm going to pour it into the jar. So once you have it stuffed in there, and that's about all I can probably get in that jar, because I have to have a 1/2 inch of head space when I add the brine to this. So this is the brine. Let me get it a little closer so it's in the video. This is the brine here in a pot, and you can see it's really clear. That alum you add to your brine really clears it up, which is really, an extra touch. And I have to admit, before I started canning with this recipe that my mother-in-law gave me, I had never canned in my life. So I'm just going to fill these to within a 1/2 inch of the neck of the jar. And that covers the pickles there, or the cucumbers. And so I already have washed and sterilized my lids. And so while it's hot, you just take these rings and tighten them onto these jars, and just hand tighten them just as tight as you can get them. Usually this is my husband's job. He's usually in here helping me. And these are ready to go into the hot bath. It's that simple. And so I fill all of these jars with these ingredients, and then I put them into that bath. And I do them all at the same time. So I wouldn't want to start adding them to the water until I have them all ready to go. So I'll just do one more jar real quick for you. Got a pepper. I think I'm gonna do this a little hotter. Do 2 peppers and some garlic. And then I'm gonna put these pickles in there. And so these are a lot bigger. You can see what I've got left here. They're really big. So sometimes if they get too big, I'll even slice them lengthwise and put them into a smaller jar and just make spears out of them, which are always really good when you're gonna eat a sandwich. You could just take a spear out and serve that with your sandwich. So these would go pretty good, I think. Let's start with some of these smaller ones. The bottom of a jar. And here we go. We're gonna have pickles again. The kids love them. They do. I want my, you know how you always like smell, and the smell and sight, your senses always remind you of your family. Well, I feel like that's the way with my pickling for my family. It reminds us of Randy's mom. Okay, well that's it. I'll take some pictures afterwards and I'll put them, I guess, let me see, I've got a few people that joined me today. Thanks for joining, guys. And if you have any questions about canning, let me know. I'm gonna put these, it takes 15 minutes for the brine. Once you put them in the hot bath, it takes 15 minutes on about medium-high heat. And so that gives me enough time to go take a quick shower and rinse this mask off my hair. So, and I'll post a picture of how it looks too, because it's very extra moisturizing. You only use it like every 4 washes, but I'm getting ready for the weekends. I want my hair to look glamorous. So, but anyway, thank you for joining me, guys. I hope you're all doing great and you have a nice 4th of July weekend. Bye-bye.